In recent weeks, a heated debate has engulfed American media and public discourse, triggered by a highly publicized exchange between two of the nation's most influential figures, Oprah Winfrey and former President Donald Trump. The controversy centers on the naming of military bases that honor Confederate leaders from the American Civil War era, a subject long debated across political, social, and historical lines. Oprah Winfrey, renowned media personality and philanthropist, publicly criticized the continued use of Confederate figures' names for U.S. military installations. In interviews and on social platforms, she called for an urgent re-evaluation of these names, arguing that they perpetuate symbols of racial oppression and undermine the values of unity and equality that modern America strives to uphold. Her comments resonated widely, sparking intense discussions about the legacy of the Confederacy, the meaning of historical memory, and the ongoing struggle to reconcile America's past with its present identity. Critics of the Confederate base names argue that honoring individuals who fought to uphold slavery is incompatible with contemporary American ideals. In a forceful rebuttal, Donald Trump, former president and influential political figure, responded publicly. In a statement widely circulated on social media and echoed by many of his supporters, Trump said, "You blacks need to respect white history." His words intensified the national conversation, bringing issues of race, heritage, and patriotism to the forefront. This investigation aims to explore the multifaceted dimensions of this controversy, the historical origins of Confederate base names, the perspectives and motivations behind calls for change, the political and social responses to Oprah Winfrey's critique and Donald Trump's retort, and the broader implications for American society. Through careful examination of facts, interviews with historians, military experts, civil rights advocates, and political analysts, this report seeks to provide a comprehensive, balanced understanding of the controversy. As this report unfolds across 10 chapters, we will dissect the historical context of the base's naming, analyze the social and political impact of the dispute, and consider possible paths forward for a nation grappling with its complex history. To understand the current controversy, it is essential to examine the historical context behind the naming of U.S. military bases after Confederate leaders. The American Civil War, fought from 1861 to 1865, was a brutal conflict between the Union states and the secessionist Confederate states, primarily over issues including states' rights and, most pivotally, slavery. Following the war, the United States underwent Reconstruction, a turbulent period aimed at rebuilding the South and integrating formerly enslaved people into American society. However, many white Southerners resisted these changes, and over time, the Lost Cause narrative emerged, a cultural movement that sought to recast the Confederacy's motives as honorable and downplay the central role of slavery. This narrative influenced how the Confederacy was remembered in public life, including the naming of public spaces, monuments, and military installations. Several bases, particularly those established or renamed during the early to mid-20th century, adopted the names of prominent Confederate generals such as Robert E. Lee, Thomas Stonewall Jackson, and Nathan Bedford Forrest. For example, Fort Lee in Virginia and Fort Hood in Texas bear the names of Confederate generals who played significant roles in the Civil War. These naming decisions were often made during periods of racial segregation and Jim Crow laws, leading many historians to assert that they served to reinforce white supremacy and marginalize African Americans. The use of Confederate names for military bases was further complicated by their association with valor and military prowess, which some argue honors soldiers' skills regardless of the cause they served. Others contend that honoring figures who fought to preserve slavery is incompatible with the values upheld by today's armed forces and society at large. The debate over these names has simmered for decades but gained renewed urgency in recent years, especially amid wider movements addressing racial injustice and calls to reconsider Confederate symbols in public spaces. Understanding this historical background is crucial to contextualizing Oprah Winfrey's recent call to rename these bases and the subsequent response from Donald Trump and his supporters. Oprah Winfrey, a prominent figure in American media and culture, has long been recognized for her advocacy on issues of social justice and racial equality. Her recent public criticism of military bases named after Confederate figures added significant weight to the ongoing national conversation about the legacy of the Confederacy. In a series of interviews and social media posts, Oprah called for the renaming of these military installations, emphasizing that honoring Confederate leaders undermines efforts to build an inclusive society. She stated that maintaining these names perpetuates a painful history of racial oppression and contradicts the ideals that the United States military claims to defend. Her statements resonated broadly, especially among civil rights organizations. Many veterans and younger generations who see Confederate symbols as incompatible with contemporary values. Organizations such as the NAACP and the Southern Poverty Law Center publicly supported her position, framing the issue as part of a larger reckoning with systemic racism. However, Oprah's critique also drew criticism from various quarters. Opponents argued that removing Confederate names is an erasure of history and a disrespect to the heritage and sacrifices of ancestors. Some viewed it as an attack on Southern identity and traditions. The debate quickly gained traction across national media platforms, social networks, and political arenas. Public opinion polls indicated a division along racial and political lines, with many African Americans and Democrats supporting renaming efforts, while a significant portion of white conservatives opposed changes. This polarized reaction underscored the enduring sensitivity surrounding Confederate symbols and highlighted the challenges faced in reconciling differing perspectives on history and memory. Oprah's intervention thus served as a catalyst, amplifying voices on both sides and propelling the controversy into a prominent national spotlight. Following Oprah Winfrey's public criticism of Confederate base names, former President Donald Trump issued a direct and controversial response that intensified the national debate. Trump's statement, circulated widely on social media and through political allies, included the phrase, "You blacks need to respect white history." This blunt remark immediately drew widespread attention and criticism. Many observers described the statement as racially charged and dismissive of legitimate concerns about the legacy of the Confederacy. Civil rights groups condemned the language as inflammatory, noting that it deepened divisions rather than fostering constructive dialogue. Supporters of Trump defended his remarks as an expression of pride in American history and heritage, viewing calls to rename bases as an attack on tradition and patriotism. For them, the Confederate figures commemorated by the military installations represent valor and military leadership, not racism. Trump's response also polarized political discourse. Many Republican leaders echoed the defense of Confederate names, arguing that changing them would rewrite history and dishonor veterans. Meanwhile, Democratic leaders and activists highlighted the need to confront systemic racism and the symbolism of honoring Confederate generals. The controversy surrounding Trump's comments further mobilized public demonstrations and discussions. Across the country, some military personnel expressed discomfort with serving at bases bearing Confederate names, citing concerns about the message it sends to minority service members. Analysts point out that Trump's rhetoric reflected and contributed to the heightened racial and political tensions in America. His approach amplified emotions and complicated efforts to find consensus on the issue. The episode illustrates how debates over historical memory and race continue to shape American politics, especially when prominent figures use charged language. That resonates deeply across diverse communities. To gain a deeper understanding of the controversy surrounding Confederate base names, this chapter explores the perspectives of historians and military experts who provide context and analysis on the issue. Historians emphasize that the naming of military bases after Confederate leaders occurred predominantly during the early mid-20th century, a period marked by the entrenchment of Jim Crow laws and institutionalized racial segregation. According to Dr. Lisa Monroe, a historian specializing in American Civil War memory, these naming decisions were less about honoring military excellence and more about reinforcing white supremacy in the South. Dr. Monroe explains, the naming of these bases was part of a broader cultural effort to legitimize the lost cause narrative, which sought to rewrite history and minimize the central role of slavery in the Confederacy's cause. Military experts, meanwhile, acknowledge the complexity of honoring military figures who were technically adversaries to the United States during the Civil War. Colonel James Reynolds, a retired Army officer and military historian, notes that, while the U.S. Army values tradition and recognizes military skill, the symbolism of Confederate names is increasingly seen as problematic. Many service members today feel conflicted about serving at installations named for generals who fought to preserve slavery. It raises questions about inclusivity and the message we send to all members of the armed forces. Colonel Reynolds said the Department of Defense has faced growing pressure to reconsider these names. In recent years, reports and commissions have recommended renaming bases to better reflect the values of the contemporary military and nation. Some historians caution against oversimplifying the issue, suggesting that any change should be accompanied by educational efforts to provide a nuanced understanding of history. They argue that renaming should not erase history, but rather honor figures who embody the principles the military and nation seek to uphold. This expert analysis highlights the complex intersection of history, symbolism, and modern values that the debate over Confederate base names The debate over Confederate base names cannot be separated from the broader social and political movements shaping America's discourse on race, history, and identity. In recent years, movements such as Black Lives Matter have brought renewed attention to systemic racism and the symbolism embedded in public monuments and names. The resurgence of social justice activism, especially following high-profile incidents of racial violence, has intensified calls to reevaluate symbols associated with the Confederacy. Activists argue that military bases named after Confederate generals perpetuate a legacy that marginalizes African Americans and contradicts the ideals of equality and justice. Political forces have responded in varied ways. Democratic lawmakers have largely supported efforts to rename bases, framing the issue as part of necessary reforms to address racial inequities. Several state legislatures and city councils have passed resolutions calling for change, often citing the harmful impact of Confederate symbols on minority communities. Conversely, many Republican politicians have opposed renaming efforts, portraying them as politically motivated attempts to rewrite history and undermine national pride. This divide reflects deeper partisan cleavages on issues of race and heritage. Grassroots movements have organized protests, petitions, and educational campaigns to raise awareness and build public support for renaming. Meanwhile, conservative groups have launched counter-campaigns defending Confederate names as essential parts of American heritage. Media coverage of these social and political dynamics has further fueled polarization, sometimes amplifying tensions. Rather than fostering dialogue, this chapter illustrates how the conflict over Confederate base names is emblematic of broader cultural battles in America, where questions of identity, history, and justice collide in the public sphere. As the controversy surrounding Confederate base names intensified, various government bodies and military institutions faced pressure to respond with policies and official positions. In December 2020, the National Defense Authorization Act (NDAA) for fiscal year 2021 included a provision mandating the establishment of a commission to review and recommend changes to the names of military assets honoring Confederate figures. This marked a significant legislative acknowledgement of the issue. The Naming Commission, officially called the Commission on the Naming of Items of the Department of Defense that commemorate the Confederate States of America or any person who served voluntarily with the Confederate States of America, was tasked with studying the historical context and impact of these names and proposing alternatives. The Department of Defense has publicly stated its commitment to creating a military environment that is inclusive and respectful of all service members, recognizing that the presence of Confederate names poses challenges to unit cohesion and morale. Some military leaders have voiced support for renaming initiatives, noting that the armed forces must reflect the nation's values and embrace diversity. However, other voices within the military and political spheres have resisted, arguing that such changes undermine tradition and honor veteran service. In addition to federal actions, several states have passed legislation or taken administrative Steps to remove or replace Confederate symbols on public property, though military bases fall under federal jurisdiction, complicating local efforts. Legal challenges have also arisen. Some opponents of renaming argue that changes violate historical preservation laws or infringe on free speech rights. Courts have so far largely deferred to the discretion of military and government agencies in managing their assets. The evolving legal and institutional landscape demonstrates both the complexity of addressing Confederate symbolism and the increasing recognition of the need to reconcile history with contemporary societal values. Public opinion on the controversy surrounding Confederate-based names reveals sharp divisions along racial, political, and regional lines. Multiple national polls conducted in recent years indicate that attitudes toward renaming these military installations vary significantly based on demographic factors. Among African American respondents, a clear majority support renaming bases to remove Confederate references, viewing such changes as a necessary step toward racial justice and inclusivity. Many express that maintaining Confederate names perpetuates a legacy of oppression and alienation. In contrast, a substantial portion of white Americans, especially those identifying as conservative or Republican, oppose renaming efforts. For this group, Confederate names often symbolize heritage, regional pride, and military valor rather than racism. Political affiliation strongly correlates with opinions. Democrats and independents lean heavily in favor of renaming, while Republicans tend to resist changes. This partisan split reflects broader national polarization on issues of race and history. Geographically, support for renaming tends to be stronger in urban and northern states, whereas opposition is more pronounced in rural areas and southern states where Confederate history is deeply ingrained in local culture. Age also plays a role. Younger Americans are generally more supportive of renaming initiatives, influenced by contemporary social movements and evolving views on race and identity. These demographic differences underscore the challenge of achieving consensus on Confederate-based names. The divisions reflect not only differing interpretations of history, but also contrasting experiences and values shaped by race, politics, and geography. Understanding this landscape is critical for policymakers and leaders seeking to navigate the controversy and foster dialogue that respects diverse perspectives while advancing social progress. As the controversy over Confederate-based names continues, various proposals and actions have emerged seeking to resolve the issue while balancing historical acknowledgement and contemporary values. The Naming Commission, established by the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act, has been actively reviewing the list of military assets bearing Confederate names. Their process involves historical research, public consultation, and recommendations for alternative names that reflect unity, valor, and American ideals. Several suggested approaches include honoring civil rights leaders, distinguished military personnel from diverse backgrounds, or geographic features relevant to the local area. This strategy aims to replace divisive symbols with inclusive ones that better represent the nation's diversity. Some advocates emphasize the importance of educational initiatives alongside renaming, ensuring that history is neither erased nor forgotten, but contextualized. Museums, plaques, and interpretive programs can provide deeper understanding of the Confederacy and the reasons for change. However, the renaming process faces challenges. Political opposition remains significant, particularly among lawmakers representing southern states. Some argue for preserving Confederate names as a matter of heritage and caution against what they call revisionism. Funding, logistics, and the scale of the changes also present practical difficulties. Military infrastructure involves extensive signage, documentation, and institutional identity, all of which require coordinated efforts. Public engagement remains critical. Leaders on all sides acknowledge that transparent communication and inclusive dialogue are necessary to ease tensions and build consensus. The renaming initiative represents more than a change of signage. It symbolizes America's ongoing struggle to reconcile its past with its commitment to equality and unity. How the country navigates this process may set a precedent for addressing other contentious symbols in public life. The controversy over military bases named after Confederate leaders reveals profound tensions at the heart of American society between history and memory, heritage and justice, division and unity. This investigation has explored the historical origins of these names, the passionate voices calling for change, the fervent opposition defending tradition, and the complex interplay of race, politics, and identity that shapes public opinion. Oprah Winfrey's critique reignited a national conversation about the symbols we honor and the messages they send, particularly to African Americans and marginalized communities. Donald Trump's response highlighted the deep polarization and differing views of history that persist in the country. Historians and military experts have provided nuanced perspectives, acknowledging both the problematic legacy of Confederate symbolism and the challenges inherent in reconciling history with modern values. Government and military institutions have begun formal processes to address the issue. Though political resistance and practical challenges remain, public opinion remains divided, reflecting broader societal fractures. Yet the momentum toward renaming and re-examining public symbols suggests a growing willingness to confront uncomfortable truths and seek greater inclusivity. Ultimately, the path forward requires thoughtful engagement, education, and dialogue that honors the complexities of American history while embracing a vision of unity and respect for all citizens. As the nation continues to grapple with these issues, the debate over Confederate base names serves as a microcosm of the larger struggle to define what it means to be American in the 21st century, a struggle between remembering the past and building a more just future. If you found this report insightful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more in-depth investigations. Activate the notification bell so you never miss an important update. And please, leave a like to support our work and help us bring you more quality content. Your engagement makes all the difference. Thank you for watching.